Coming back to life, I deliberately showed up late to delay getting the marriage certificate with Felix. In my previous life, after Felix found out I was pregnant, he disappeared with Linda for 20 years. Later, when I was on the verge of death, he returned. He looked at Linda's photo and said to me, "If we had waited a little longer to get our marriage certificate, would things have turned out differently?" When I realized I was reborn, Felix was standing at the dorm door, waiting to go get the marriage certificate together. I lied, saying I had to deliver something to a colleague, and told him to wait for me at the marriage registry. After parting with Felix, I headed up the mountain. I lay in Wendy's rocking chair, gaze fixed on the sea of clouds out front and soaking up the sun. Wendy handed me a roasted sweet potato and curiously asked, "Aren't you supposed to get the certificate with Felix today? What are you doing here?" I took a bite of the warm sweet potato, smiled and told her, "Wendy, I had a nightmare. Woke up feeling uneasy." Wendy comforted me. "It was just a dream. What matters is living life. After you marry Felix, life will be good. There's no need to fear nightmares." I was taken aback for a moment, then nodded with a smile. "Wendy's right. I'm just hanging around for a bit, then I'll go. Marry Felix? Not gonna happen this time." In the last life, right after we got the marriage certificate, Felix bumped into a girl as we left the registry. The girl's name was Linda, and she lived in the village where we worked. On the way back, Felix was quiet the entire time. I thought he was just being cautious now that he was married. Turns out, as I found out when I was about to die, that bump was love at first sight for Felix. He wasn't avoiding me, but regretting why he couldn't have delayed getting the certificate by just one day. After that, Felix grew cold towards me, staring off into the village a lot. I asked why, but he dodged the question every time. And with work piling up, I eventually stopped asking. I waited for him to come around and open up to me. When the village project ended, Felix and I were assigned to different projects and had to live apart. I thought it was temporary, but each assignment took him further away. When I brought it up, he just said, "We're following organizational arrangements." One day when I returned for a job report, I overheard some colleagues talking and found out that after the first assignment, Felix had actually been the one asking to be sent away. We had a huge fight about it, but after, he held me and apologized without explaining why. By dawn, Felix was gone. I figured our marriage was over. Then out of nowhere, I found out I was pregnant. Once Felix knew, he became caring and started looking after me. He clumsily tried cooking, listened to the baby through my belly, and took walks with me every night. And then out of the blue, Felix vanished. I asked around and searched everywhere, but no one knew where he'd gone. I had to handle everything alone: medical checkups, childbirth, hospital visits, raising the kid, and even arranging the funerals for both sets of our parents. I honestly thought he was dead, but right at the moment when I was on my deathbed, he showed up again. That's how I found out he'd been with Linda for those 20 years, adopting a son and lavishing love on him. Linda died before him, and her only regret was not being his wife in this lifetime. Felix claimed he felt sorry yet resented me. I didn't get it. If he didn't love me, why not just tell me from the start? He could have divorced me and given Linda a home, rather than abandoning me and the kid, and ignoring our parents. What right did he have to resent me? The son I raised said he envied Felix and Linda's adopted son, who grew up surrounded by love. He reproached me for bringing him into the world without his approval. That's when I realized he'd been secretly in contact with his father, keeping it a secret from me all those years. I spent an hour at Wendy's. After saying goodbye, I headed straight for the registry office. When I arrived, I saw Felix helping Linda get up. Felix was staring at Linda, lost in her eyes. His once angry face now painted with awe. In my previous life, I was focused on helping Linda, and didn't notice Felix acting strange. Now looking from an outsider's view, it's all so clear. "Felix, I'm here. Did I keep you waiting?" I said. Felix suddenly froze, looking nervous. "Oh, Lucy, you're here." "I am." I noticed Linda's gaze was different from the last life. Her look was complicated, maybe even envious. When I glanced again, she looked as though nothing had changed, like it was all my imagination. I wondered what Felix's choice would be now. Will he leave me for Linda or repeat history, by getting the certificate with me, but living a secret life with Linda. It's late, let's get the certificate. I pretended to hurry things along. Felix turned pale. In the last life, Linda wasn't injured. This time, how did she get hurt so conveniently? Could she have been reborn too? I sized up Linda, finding nothing. Felix took Linda to the clinic. The doctor said it was just a minor wound, almost fully healed, nothing else. Linda blushed while Felix seemed happy. On the way back, passing the registry, Felix hesitated. Lucy, they're closed. How about we come back tomorrow? I said casually, let's see. Picking a good day for getting the license is important. But honestly, there's never going to be a perfect day for that in this lifetime. I smiled faintly. Felix sighed. All right, I'll tell Wendy when I get back. Felix and I had biked here together. On the way back, Linda didn't hesitate to hop on Felix's bike. Felix glanced at me, a bit awkward, but he didn't say no. I pretended not to notice and biked off ahead. The cool breeze carried over the sound of Linda and Felix talking. I couldn't make out their words, but their joy was obvious. And Felix's deliberately suppressed laughter too. How long has it been since I saw Felix smile? Feels like since last life. After meeting Linda, Felix never smiled at me again. But now none of this matters to me anymore. When we entered the village, the villagers saw Linda sitting on Felix's bike. Her arm wrapped around Felix's waist. When they looked at me, they'd wink or shake their heads with a cough. I knew what they meant, but I just smiled and headed back to my dorm. For the wedding, Felix had already rented the place. Most of his stuff was already moved there. I passed by the wedding house and stopped. There were 2 rooms on either side for sleeping, with a central living space and a small yard. Last life, after returning from the marriage office, I saw those red decorations at home and felt sweet inside. No one knew that the day before getting the license, the groom had joyfully arranged the house. But then on the wedding night, everything went cold. That night, like countless lonely nights after, we lay quietly in bed, did nothing, and struggled to fall asleep. Without waiting for Felix to come back, I pushed my bike and returned to the dorm. Once I was back, I took a transfer notice from the drawer. So-called transfer, but really, it was a promotion with a raise waiting for me back home. Last life, I gave it up to marry Felix. 3 months later, we were assigned to different places. After that, Felix intentionally distanced himself across the country. Later, when I got pregnant, Felix disappeared. I was left raising the child alone while caring for both our parents. Struggled at work, slowly moved from important roles to the outskirts. Never got a raise or promotion again in my life. During elementary school, my son often looked at my tired, busy self with disdain. He said, other moms are so pretty. Why can't you make yourself look nice like them? Other moms? Linda. The more I think back, the more I shiver. Turns out, even back then, my son was in contact with his missing father. And he kept it hidden from me forever. How laughable, how utterly ridiculous. During dinner, Felix didn't come to me like he used to. I took my meal box to the cafeteria by myself. In the cafeteria, I saw Felix and Linda sitting across from each other. They were serving each other food. Not sure what Felix said, but Linda covered her mouth and laughed. Seeing me, Felix first froze, then quickly stood up. Lucy, you're here. Well, Linda just got back home. There's no food, so I brought her here. I meant to get you something. Didn't expect you so soon. Soon. There weren't many people left eating in the cafeteria. Not much choice left with the food too. I couldn't help but remember last life. After we got the license, Felix went to get us food from the cafeteria. But it was late when he finally returned. Empty-handed. He just said, food's gone, hold on for the night. That night, the only sound was probably my growling stomach. Turns out, at this time last life, Felix was already looking after Linda. I didn't say a word, just walked past him, grabbed what was left and packed it back to the dorm. Halfway through eating, there was a knock on the door. It was Felix and Linda. Felix looked at me with a complicated expression, cleared his throat. I stared back silent. Felix glanced at Linda, standing carefully beside him. His eyes were full of warmth, and when he spoke again, there was determination in his voice. Lucy, since Linda just got back from the city, you know, her family has been away for a while and needs cleaning. We haven't registered yet, So I was thinking maybe we could let Linda stay at our place for a few days. I glanced at Linda. Linda pulled back like a startled rabbit, hiding behind Felix. In both past and present, I saw two completely different Lindas. If someone told me Linda wasn't reborn too, I wouldn't believe it. But I don't have time to act with her. I don't want this man anymore. Whatever Linda does is pointless to me. Sure, it's your house, you decide. Felix didn't expect me to agree so easily. His prepared speech got caught in his throat. But I don't like others touching my things, so I'll go collect my stuff in a bit. Felix was surprised, hurriedly said, No need, no need. I'll put your things in the other room. So, he not only plans to let Linda stay in our home, he also wants her to sleep in our marital bed. Ridiculous. I saw Linda also curled her lips into a smile. After dinner, I took the flashlight to pack up my things at the wedding house. When I arrived, Felix was busy making Linda's bed. Using the new sheets I carefully picked for the wedding night. Felix seemed surprised to see me. Lucy, why are you here? I already put your stuff in my room. Oh, I replied, turned around, and went to the next room to get my things. Felix followed, with a complicated look, his eyes showing an emotion I couldn't quite read. Lucy. At that moment, Linda came running out of the room. Felix, that bedsheet you're planning to use for your wedding with Lucy, right? Are you sure it's cool for me to sleep on it? I'm really okay with sleeping on dirty clothes if it's a problem, Linda said, her voice getting smaller. I saw Felix look at her, and there was a hint of sympathy in his eyes. He turned to me. Lucy, you see, all our bedsheets are new. This one's just a bedsheet. I couldn't miss the flash of triumph in Linda's eyes. It's just that she hasn't realized that I've already decided not to keep a guy like Felix since the moment I reincarnated. Thanks, Lucy and Felix, you're being way too nice to me. Wow, I never thought there'd be a day I'd get to stay in the wedding house and sleep on Felix's wedding bed. There was something off about that comment, and Felix sensed it too. But he looked at me, said nothing, as if testing my limits. Linda quickly seemed to realize what she said, covered her mouth, putting on a look of someone who made a mistake. Sorry, Lucy, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean anything really. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing between Felix and me. I think I'll just sleep on the dirty clothes. With that, she tried to grab the dirty clothes from the bag. Felix hurriedly stopped her. I reassured Linda. It's fine really. You can sleep here, it's not a big deal for me. Felix couldn't figure anything out from my expression, and just stood there pondering. I was busy packing, and couldn't be bothered with him. Linda tried too hard to cover up and only made it worse, hoping to provoke me and highlight her fragility in front of Felix, wishing he'd dislike me more. But living through this twice, why would I care? The only thing lucky for her in the last life was that she didn't flaunt in front of me as much. In this life, she's not nearly flamboyant enough. I leaned in close to Linda and whispered, Oh Linda, you're overthinking it. Why would I care? Felix cares about you, and that's cool by me. Even if he marries you, that's fine. Just don't know if he actually will. I smiled and winked at Linda. Her face dropped in discomfort at my words. She couldn't understand how I was different from the easy-to-bully Lucy of the past. But she quickly turned smug again upon realizing something. I finished packing my things, ready to leave with my bundle when Felix suddenly called after me. He stepped forward, trying to take the bundle from me, but I refused. What a joke, Linda's been reborn. In my last life, she was a mistress for a good part of my life. This time, I'm here to set things right. She thinks Felix is her personal property now. I'm not going to get caught up in that mess. Lucy, are you upset? I can explain. How surprising. Last life, he'd rather waste my entire life than open his mouth. Now he does? But I already know what he'll say. Just an excuse to float between feelings under the guise of care. Explanation? Not necessary. Besides, Linda wouldn't agree. Ah, yes, there it is. Linda screamed, drawing Felix back inside immediately, leaving me behind. I chuckled, adjusted my bundle, and walked away. In my last life, I was married to Felix for 21 years, and my life ended at 45. Pretty young to go, I'd say. When I gave birth to that ungrateful kid, I had major complications. That's when my health started to decline. Even before I could fully recover, I had to care for our son, deal with Felix's demanding parents, and work, all while chasing after Felix. My health only got worse over time. Raising our son, until he was 20, took everything I had. When Felix disappeared, I never really slept well again. But this time around, I didn't marry Felix. I didn't exhaust my life from overwork. I'm healthy. I finally got a good night's sleep with no dreams, the first in 2 lifetimes. The next day, I asked my boss for a leave and let him know I agreed to relocate. He was surprised. "Didn't you say you didn't want to be separated from Felix after getting married?" I shook my head. "I'm not marrying him. My career is what matters to me now." My boss smiled at me, pleased. "Last life he tried to persuade me too. He said, 'With your skills you can achieve so much more.' But I lost my wits, gave up on such a great opportunity for a worthless guy." I asked him to keep my departure under wraps and discuss my exit timeline with him. Leaving the boss's office, I headed straight to the train station. Tickets were hard to get during this time. You had to stand in long lines. As I biked past the wedding house, I saw through the picket fence Felix and Linda brushing their teeth together in the yard. Felix casually took a towel from the clothesline and helped Linda wipe her hands. Linda looked at him, eyes full of affection. When they noticed me biking by, Felix's face turned white, and he quickly distanced himself from Linda. I turned my gaze away, not caring that one looked guilty as a thief, and the other was feigning hurt feelings. I relied on memory to bring me to the train station. After paying to park my bike, I joined the flow of people into the ticket hall. During this time, folks traveling far carried big bags and bundles with everything they could. Looking at the crowded mass of people, I decided to bring as little as possible, especially the bulky stuff. What could be sold I'd sell. What couldn't I'd give away. After a long wait, I chose a sleeper ticket over a standing ticket. My last life had been tough enough. In this life, I wanted to treat myself well. By the time I left the train station, it was afternoon. I hadn't brought food to the line, lacking the experience from the last life. I missed lunch buying the ticket, and my stomach was now practically eating itself. I asked around and found the state-run restaurant Felix, and I visited in my previous life. Back then, after our co-workers introduced us, we met here for a blind date. Felix has a nice look, fair skin, just the clean type I like. He's also in the tech field, just like me. And both our families are in the same area. I thought it would be convenient for our families to connect in the future. He was also pretty happy with how I looked. So we decided to give it a try. During our relationship, he wasn't particularly great to me, but not bad either. He took care of me in life. At work, whenever we faced some tough problems, he would help me solve them. There wasn't a lot of passionate love between us, more of a suitable match. I thought I would spend my life peacefully with him. But then he threw a curveball my way. Felix proposed to me 2 months after we started dating. He seemed happy to make the decision to marry me. But the childhood sweetheart couldn't compete with the one who felt like destiny. When Linda showed up, she made him feel that spark. His emotions drifted, but he shouldn't have, for love, selfishly left everything behind and dragged out my life. I parked my bike and went into the restaurant. It wasn't too crowded at that time, so I easily spotted Felix and Linda sitting in a corner. Linda saw me first. She stood up and waved at me enthusiastically. "Lucy, are you here for a meal?" "Well, Felix and I are here. Join us. There's no need to be shy. It's just a matter of adding another pair of chopsticks." No wonder she managed to steal someone else's husband for over 20 years. A real top-notch manipulator. Just 2 sentences, and she put herself in the spotlight. "That would be awkward. Wouldn't it disturb your date?" I said with a smile, glancing at Felix. Felix clearly panicked. He quickly stood up to pull out a chair for me. "Lucy, don't get the wrong idea. My relationship with Felix isn't what you think. He's just worried I'm too skinny and wants to help me eat more." There she goes, showing off again. I ignored Felix's gesture and sat next to Linda. Felix awkwardly took his seat, rubbing his nose. I was shocked to see the table full of lavish dishes. Wow, this must cost Felix at least half a month's salary. He's really generous with Linda. Linda offered me some braised pork. "Lucy, try the braised pork here. Felix says it's their specialty, so he insisted we order it. He even said he'd take some to go for me." Come on, have a bite. And the fish, you have to taste it too. I've never tasted such good fish. Felix said he can cook it too. And he promised to make it for me often. Felix can cook? Last time I was pregnant, he was fumbling around in the kitchen, knocking over things. I ended up pushing him out to cook myself. Turns out you can fake love. I took the braised pork and savored it. It was indeed delicious. Food in those days was genuine. The pork was really fragrant. And the river fish, none of that later oily taste, just truly tender freshness. I savored it, mostly ignoring what Linda said. Suddenly, Linda yelped, nearly causing me to drop my chopsticks. Sorry, Lucy. I got startled by a fishbone. Where was I? Oh right, Lucy, have you ever tasted Felix's cooking? If not, come by tonight. He promised to cook for me. Felix, isn't that right? Startled by a fishbone? She certainly startled me. Linda obviously noticed my indifference and couldn't stand it. Keep flaunting. Let's see who you have left to show off to when I leave. Linda, you're so lucky. I've known Felix for so long and didn't know he could cook. You've known him for just 2 days. And he's already cooking for you. Lucky me. I get to enjoy it tonight too. She wanted to drive me crazy with jealousy, but I didn't care at all. Linda was stunned. Felix turned shades of blue and white throughout all this. I kept eating, not caring how they reacted. When my scallion tofu arrived, I pushed it towards Linda and Felix and invited them to have some. The meal was a lot quieter after that. Finally, I could eat in peace. Leaving the restaurant, I said goodbye to Linda and Felix and biked away. I needed to go to the post office to call my parents. After Felix disappeared in my past life, I raised our child alone, took care of Felix's parents, and worked a job. I spun like a top every day. For some reason, even though my family background was no worse than theirs, they just didn't accept me. Not only did they refuse to help with the child, but they also found ways to make my life harder. If I ever did something they didn't like, they'd cause a scene at my workplace. Getting a stable job was tough, especially since I had to support my son. So I endured it. My parents helped me a lot while taking care of their grandkids. They hoped I'd find someone else and remarry. But when Felix's parents found out, they stormed over to my parents and made a scene, accusing us of trying to kill off the old folks. Every time a man showed interest in me, Felix's mother would follow with my son in tow. She'd have him run over crying to disrupt things. Eventually, no one wanted to be with me, so I gave up on remarrying to focus on raising my son. During that time, because of Felix's parents, my mom and dad endured a lot, but mostly they worried about me. Even when they passed, not being able to let go of me was their biggest concern. The phone connected quickly. They heard the quiver in my voice. My parents were worried, thinking Felix had bullied me. They were furious and wanted to confront him. I calmed them down and told them what happened recently and about my decision. After a long silence, they only said, as long as it was well thought out, they supported me. That made me breathe easier. I told them about my decision to return. My train ticket to leave is for 3 days later. My parents promised to make all my favorite dishes and wait for me at home. I got back to the dorm and opened the door. I found Felix sitting at my desk, flipping through study materials. I almost forgot. He has a key to my dorm too. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the drawer with my transfer report was locked. My relationship with Felix is unclear, and I don't want any surprises before leaving. When Felix saw I was back, he quickly stood up to pour me some water. He had something to say but hesitated to speak. I sat on the bed, sipping my tea slowly, waiting for him to speak. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He turned towards me and said, "Lucy, things aren't like you think between me and Linda." I swallowed my tea and replied flatly, "What do I think?" Felix was stuck. If I were the Lucy from my past life, I would have believed him, explanation or not. But I've lived a lifetime, seen and experienced my own tragic life. Even if Felix explained 1,000 times, it'd mean nothing to me. Before I died in my previous life, he confessed at my hospital bedside. He said he fell in love with Linda at first sight. It was true love. It couldn't compare to what we had. I felt more like a third wheel in his and Linda's relationship. A flaw, a thorn. Lucy, whether you believe it or not, I just felt sorry for Linda being an orphan. So I wanted to help her more, Felix explained, looking away. He didn't dare meet my eyes. How could I believe him? But I still said, okay, I trust you. Can you leave now? I'm exhausted from a long day and need rest. Oh, by the way, please leave my dorm key. Felix's face instantly froze. Clearly, he could tell I didn't believe him. What a mess. I began packing up my things. After working here for 6 months, I didn't have much to take. Just some clothes and essentials. What I needed to settle were the wedding items Felix and I bought together. Looks like I'll need to sort this out with Felix before I go. Just then there was a knock at the door. It was Felix. He had a box of pastries in hand and cheerfully offered it to me. Here, Lucy, open it. I opened the box and found money and a ticket inside. Felix smiled and said, I've decided from now on, after we get married, you'll manage my money. Just give me a living allowance each month. Looking at Felix, I suddenly felt like I didn't know him. In my past life, forget handing over his paycheck. After we registered our marriage, I never even saw a penny from him. When I had complications from childbirth, his parents didn't pay a dime and even said let her die. Keeping her alive is a waste of money. My family paid the doctor to save me, and that's how I lived. Later on, I covered the costs of his parents' medications and funerals. During the 20 years Felix was missing, he secretly contacted our son. I bet he was in touch with his parents too. I don't know if he gave them money. I just know that when his mom died, she called my son to her. Though he acted sad when he came out, I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. After the funeral, I found nothing of value at home. Then I fell ill and had no money for treatment. I just hung on until my brief recovery. Thinking about it, Felix must have known I was sick and needed money. Thinking my son might have hidden money from his grandma, yet refused to help me, I felt a dull pain inside. Felix saw me shuddering and rushed to support me, but I pushed him away. I leaned against the wall to steady myself. When I looked at Felix again, I felt nothing but coldness. Felix seemed to have noticed something was wrong. I looked at the money in the tin box. Since Felix brought the money, I couldn't settle the past life's debts. But I'll settle this life's accounts. I took out half of the wedding expenses from the box and handed the rest and the box back to Felix. Felix was confused by my actions but didn't ask. Even the slowest person would notice my change. He didn't understand what happened in those few minutes. Just felt like something was slipping away. After making sure I was all right, he left, looking back with every step. That night, I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of the past life. Felix's parents told him about my childbirth complications. Felix merely responded with a hum on the phone. I also saw them secretly taking my infant son to see Felix. Felix knew I was looking for him, yet conspired with everyone to keep it from me. No wonder everyone who knew him refused to speak with me. I also dreamed of colleagues I worked with for years. They praised the love between Felix and Linda. As for me, his wife, I was just the product of a drunk Cupid tangling up the wrong strings, according to them. How ironic. I woke up to a pillow soaked in tears. But I'm alive, healthy, and life still has possibilities, right? The next 2 days were busy with work handovers. I agreed to have a meal at Linda's where Felix was cooking. Because of the silence regarding that night's money box, I assumed it was over. But then Linda came looking for me. She invited me over for dinner. Unable to refuse her hospitality, I accepted. At dinner time, I brought a gift to their home. Through the fence, I saw Linda and Felix in an embrace. Felix's hand was in a place it shouldn't have been. When he noticed me, his face turned ashen. Linda looked equally shocked, fiddling with the buttons all undone. I didn't say a word, just turned and left. I had the big meal Linda treated me to tonight, so there's no need for a gift. Not long after I left, Felix caught up with me. He grabbed me, anxiously trying to explain. Lucy, let me explain. It's not what it looks like with Linda and me. Even though I've been busy with work handovers these past few days, Wendy hasn't stopped chatting. Wendy can't stand third parties, especially ones like Linda, who go back and forth in front of the main person involved. She's always giving real-time reports on Felix and Linda's disgusting antics. She said, someone in the village saw Linda purposely brushing up against Felix, and Felix didn't avoid it. Another saw Linda and Felix eating from the same bowl. Yet another saw them holding hands in a secluded place. Right now, Felix looks quite embarrassed in front of me. I can't understand why he'd do all that with Linda, then come running to me, urging me not to misunderstand. Is he trying to replay the last life, where I stayed home to take care of his parents, while he and Linda were sweetly in love outside? Before Linda, I was the only one close to you. But just an hour after meeting her, you were taking her to the hospital. Less than 3 hours in, you allowed her to hold on to your waist on a bike ride. In under 5 hours, you left me to have dinner with her in the cafeteria. In less than 7 hours, she was staying in our marital home, sleeping in our marital bed, using the bedding I prepared for our marriage. In just one day, you spent half a month's salary treating her to a fancy meal. On the same day, you even cooked soup for her yourself. You didn't shy away from her touches, shared a bowl with her, and held her hand. Now, with all the hugging and caressing, can you really stand here and swear there's nothing between you two? Do you think I'll believe you? Maybe my words were hitting hard. Felix began to tremble. His lips moved, but no words came out. Let me guess why you're scared of a misunderstanding. Why you insist on explaining, or even using money to make me trust you. The day we planned to get our marriage license, you fell for Linda at first sight. She liked you too, so she faked an injury to stop us from getting registered. At that time, because you had feelings for Linda, deep down, you actually didn't want to go on with marrying me. But perhaps you've thought it through these days. You love Linda, wanting those romantic walks with her. I looked at Felix straight in the eye, but at the same time, you need a good wife to take care of your parents. If she can provide for them till the end, all the better. Am I right? At my last words, Felix looked up, shock filling his eyes. Seeing his stunned expression hurt me inside. Hurt by wasting a lifetime on someone so calculating. Hurt that what I thought were sweet memories from our marriage were just a joke. I can't fool myself anymore. And I won't let Felix deceive me either. That night, I went back to the dorm and started packing to leave. Linda showed up right then. She glared at me with anger. "Lucy, so you came back." She let out a short laugh seeing my calm demeanor. When she looked again, her eyes were filled with contempt and mockery. "So what if you were Felix's wife in the past life? You were just a servant to his parents. The son you worked hard to raise secretly calls me mom when you're not around. Isn't that funny? Your husband is mine, and so is the son. This life, even if you're reborn, you can't change Felix's love for me. I will be his wife, no one else." Even though I was utterly disappointed with my past life son, my heart still ached a bit hearing he called Linda mom behind my back. But it's a good thing. I won't bring him into this world this time, no matter what. Linda acted like a victorious rooster, boasting endlessly in front of me. Yet when I looked at her, my eyes held pity, sympathy, and compassion, but no anger. She fled embarrassed. She's just like me, a pitiful person. In this life, without me to clean up after her and Felix, can they live happily like the last life? Around midnight, I couldn't sleep, so I walked out to see the moon. A shadow sitting at the door startled me. In the dim light from inside, I realized it was Felix. He reeked of alcohol. Not sure how long he'd been there. Even reliving a life, I can't understand him. I got my flashlight to find Linda. Linda froze for a moment when I told her to take Felix home. Yet she followed me back to the dorm without a word. Felix was asleep, and Linda struggled to drag him away. I didn't help. The man she loves, let her deal with him herself. Wendy showed up. She pulled me along for a good drama. I followed her to what used to be mine and Felix's marital home. Felix stood there, rage on his face, as he looked at Linda, disheveled and sitting on the ground. Last night, after Linda took Felix back, she recalled how Felix chased after me, returning looking dazed, then sleeping at my dorm drunk, and even calling my name in his sleep. She was restless. While Felix was drunk, thinking she was me, she slept with him anyway. Hearing the gist of it from villagers, I felt disgusted. Picked up my luggage, I turned to leave. But Felix grabbed me. "Lucy, let me explain. Is this jerk ever gonna stop?" I took a deep breath, looked at him calmly, my eyes empty of any emotion. "Felix, I thought I made myself pretty clear yesterday." Felix was trying to look into my eyes to see if there was a hint of affection left for him, but he was disappointed. My eyes only held the indifference you'd show a stranger. Because I didn't care. I wasn't angry. And because I wasn't angry, it didn't matter. He finally realized that I really didn't care about him anymore. Felix let go of my hand, defeated. His voice was muffled as he stood behind me and whispered, "I'm sorry." Sorry for what? This life or the past one? I left the remote village and went back home. When I saw my healthy, happy parents again, I burst into tears. Even though I seemed relaxed every day after my rebirth, there was always a heavy burden in my heart. My whole life felt so suffocatingly heavy. How could I just let it go so easily? Felix and Linda could have been roughed up 1,000 ways, and I wouldn't have minded. But I have my parents, my brother and sister-in-law. I couldn't let two awful people ruin the new life I got to start. It wasn't until I saw my parents, healthy and not weighed down by me, that I felt a relief off my shoulders. I spent a few days with them, cherishing simple, happy days. Without the burden of someone else's family and Felix, I did really well at work. Didn't take long before I got a promotion and a raise. A college even hired me as a professor, fulfilling my longtime dream of teaching. I heard about Felix again a year later. Linda finally got her wish from the last life and married Felix, becoming the rightful wife. Not long after getting married, Felix took her home. His parents were no easy task. In our past life, though I had a good family and job, they still didn't think much of me. They looked down even more on Linda without a job. So they used every trick in the book to make her life hard. The house was a war zone. Felix wanted to take Linda away, but his parents wouldn't agree. They made a huge fuss. They believed Linda was beneath their son. They were resentful that she ruined my relationship with him. No way were they letting Felix take Linda away. They wanted her there to serve them. Romantic ideals quickly crumbled under the weight of daily life's challenges. Over time, Felix saw Linda as just there. Without his love, Linda was no different than any street fighter. Before long, Felix got transferred, and this time, he didn't take Linda with him. Later, I heard Linda started fighting back. She and Felix's parents were making each other miserable. And then I heard Felix cheated. Linda got so angry she stormed into the office and reported Felix. Claimed he forced himself on her back in the village when he was drunk. That I did not see coming. Turns out, they were both pieces of work. What surprised me was Felix. In the previous life, he resented me because of Linda's regret. He mourned fiercely over her picture. While this time, even after I left, there were no deep emotions for Linda. I guess I overestimated him. Someone rotten to the core only truly loves himself. How could he really regret anything? It's just bitterness over what's lost and what's unrealized. Luckily in this life, I escaped that prison. My life ahead is bright. The end.